Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Coding 101 is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This episode of Coding 101 is brought to you by Braintree. If you're working on a mobile app and searching for the right payments API, check out the Braintree V.0 SDK. With one simple integration, you get every way to pay. To learn more and to try out the sandbox, go to BraintreePayments.com/coding. And by DigitalOcean. Simple and fast cloud hosting built for developers. Deploy an SSD cloud server in 55 seconds. Try it today for free. Visit DigitalOcean.com, and once you sign up, be sure to enter the promo code C101 in the billing section for a $10 credit. On this Wildcard episode of Coding 101, we're bringing in Scott Hanselman to talk all about everything. Hello and welcome to Coding 101. It's the Twitch show where we let you into the wonderful world of the Code Warrior / Code Monkey. I'm Father Robert Balacer, the digital Jesuit, and joining me as always is my co-host, Mr. Lou Maresca, a senior software lead from Microsoft. Lou, so good to see you.
Hey, Padre, having me back. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Now, of course, the Wildcard episodes of Coding 101, it's sort of our palette cleanser. It's between coding modules, so we're between languages. At the moment, we've just switched away from Objective-C for iOS programming. We'll be moving into some Twit API programming in the next module, but we always like to treat you to a few interviews, a few laid-back episodes where we discuss the things that are important to programmers with people who are actually programming. And Lou, since you got him as a guest, please introduce our super special guest for this episode of Coding 101.
Absolutely. We want to welcome Scott Hanselman, who's a principal program manager at Microsoft, who's just all around open source, Azure, ASP.NET. He'll obviously tell you all the things he's doing, but he's just an amazing guy and amazing presenter and a public speaker, and I just wanted to get him on and get his thoughts.
Hey, everybody.
Scott, thank you very much.
A little confused, but I'm doing okay.
A little confused could actually be the tagline of Coding 101. So
none of us know our names or titles. We're just making it all up as we go along.
Exactly. As long as it's in the TriCaster, we'll figure it out later on. But Scott, we brought you on specifically because you are, you're well known. You are in the coding world a celebrity. You go around talking about the
I reject
cloud.
that.
Well, you can reject it, but I have it on good authority from the internet.
I may have good Google juice, but the goal is not to be a celebrity. Right. I mean, we're all amateurs. I just happen to be one that, is loud, old, and blogs a lot.
All right. Well, let's talk about that. Loud, old, and blogs a lot. Let's go back a little bit to the beginning. We always like to talk about how our guests came to be in computer science, computer engineering. Where did you find your passion for programming?
I think it's more a passion for building stuff. My dad is a woodworker and had a garage full of stuff to build things with wood, and I had no skill in any way of doing anything at all with my hands. And then somewhere around age 11 or 12, I was getting into trouble, and he had a van that he sold. He sold his van and he bought a Commodore 64. And because the people in the neighborhood, the principal rather, had suggested that maybe Scott wouldn't be into trouble if he had stuff to do. So they ended up selling the van and getting me this Commodore 64, and I found that I could build stuff with it. And, we built like robots with ribbon cables and stuff like that. So he has woodworking and I have, computers and robots and stuff like that.
I noticed there's a MAME cabinet behind you. Did you build that, or is that something that you acquired?
How did that get there? No, I built that from scratch. If you go up and Google with Bing for Hanselman arcade cabinet, I've got 7-part series video and explanations about how I built it, painted it, built it, opened it up. I custom built all the buttons. Got the vinyl along the top there. It's a totally legit thing, and I even hooked up these things here. The coin slots are hooked up to USB, and they act as a USB keyboard, and they light up as well.
So you're an honest to goodness maker, which that's very, very nice to see.
As opposed to all those rampant phony makers that we have out there making stuff like phonies.
Well,
I'm
I would
just a
consider
tinkerer.
myself an amateur maker. I like to put things together. I like to tinker, but you've actually combined several disciplines into making something that's beautiful. Now,
Useful,
what
yeah.
runs that main machine? What's behind it?
Right now, there's a shuttle PC with with Windows 7, and it runs Hyperspin, the Hyperspin front end, and it has there's about 4 or 5 gigs of flash video for doing what's called an attract. So when you turn it on, if you leave it alone, it'll play videos and stuff of some of the games.
I want to take us back to something that you mentioned on your blog, that you ran a BBS back in the day,
Sure,
which
yeah.
was a Tuesday, I believe.
I ran a FidoNet node as well.
And a FidoNet node. So you're really OG. What kind of BBS was it?
It was Wildcat. And surprisingly enough, my boss, Scott Hunter, one of the many Scotts that rolls up to Scott Guthrie at Microsoft, was one of the principals who wrote Wildcat. So I grew up working on Wildcat, and now my boss, my direct boss,
Full circle.
was one of the principals who wrote Wildcat.
Lou?
No, I just said full circle. That's pretty crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it is cool.
I got to ask, were you ever into the game? Was it called? I think it was called Trade Wars. It was.
Yeah, and I ran a Trade Wars door. Yeah, door games.
I tried running one. I never got much traffic, but I was very much addicted. I was on the Sandufer BBS in Fremont, California, and they had a Trade Wars game that was epic. It probably went on for 2-3 years, and I never missed a day. I always had to get my one move a day in order to move my resources. And I think that's what got me addicted to the internet.
And it was the lack of in-app purchases, I think, that caused Trade Wars to fail. If only. If only we'd thought ahead of time.
Let's move forward a little bit. So, very early on, you got a taste for tinkering. You got a taste for making things. And then you got your taste for the next generation of communications, which were interconnected computers, BBSs, FidoNet. How do you go from that to your first job?
Well, I visited a bunch of colleges, and I found that I wasn't mature enough to go to college, emotionally or otherwise, and I also didn't have any money. So I ended up going to Portland Community College for the software engineering program. It was the first year, I think it was 1992, 1991, when they started software engineering, which was formal and different from computer science. And it was much more in practice. We sat down with Charles Petzold's book, Programming Windows, where Hello World in Windows was 91 lines of code. And one of the things that was nice about this program was that the second half of the second year was a required internship. So I had to go out and find an unpaid internship somewhere in Portland. And I found one at a company called Chrome Data. And I worked there for free, and then for $5 an hour, and then $6 an hour, and then $10 an hour, and worked my way up the process from there.
So Scott, Chrome Data, what did you actually do there? You said you were interning and then you moved up to like an actual permanent position there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, junior engineer, I think was the title. I worked in Visual Basic 3. I used Dan Appleman's VBX controls and called C APIs into the Win16 at the time API in order to make owner draw windows and all sorts of low-level WM, this and that type Windows stuff. I mean, I'm dating myself, but you asked me to.
Well, in your LinkedIn entry, it says that when you were working there, you were collecting, standardizing, and enhancing.
You lost me there as you read my LinkedIn. So.
Oh, okay. No, but
I thought you wanted to provide value, and now we're talking about LinkedIn.
Well, no, we're going beyond LinkedIn. We're starting with LinkedIn, but whenever I hear that, whenever I hear someone is saying, okay, well, I'm collecting data and then I'm standardizing it and then I'm bringing something out of it, some sort of analysis. Back in 1992, what did that actually entail?
Basically, we would go and collect all of the faxes that Ford and all the different manufacturers would give you of all the auto parts. And then we would build a normalized database of make, models, and styles so that you could go and price out a car and say, well, I need the California emissions package, and I need this bumper, and I need those tires, and this excludes that, which includes this. You go and price it out. So it was basically Carfax 10 years before Carfax.
Wow. Okay. And with that data, what could they do? So, I mean, this, of course, a precursor to what we might consider data analytics with big data. You're taking something that is a disparate data set, although it is all confined to the automotive industry, and you're trying to bring value out of it. Do you know where it went from there? Or was it just a pool of data that you created?
Well, we sold it, and we sold it like a Carfax. We had digiboards, and we would have people call in, talk to a human being. They'd fill out forms on an admin screen written in Visual Basic, and then we would drop it into a database, and it was running SQL Server 4.21. And then we had a farm of fax machines, and we would go and fax them back a booklet that indicated, here's what the dealers can do for you, and then they would go and use that to try to get a better price on the car.
Was it a natural step to go from that to e-commerce sites? Because I know you spent a number of years both at, was it Step Technology, and then what was the name of the last company that you worked for before you came to Microsoft?
Carillion?
Right. That you seem to be doing a lot with e-commerce finances.
Well, that's what people do with computers, is they try to make money. So I don't think it's unusual. I think it's the primary use case.
Okay. All right. But for you, it couldn't just be a job. I mean, you had to have found some sort of excitement, some sort of allure to that specific use of data, that specific career in software.
No.
No?
No, I mean, you got to understand, this is 25 years ago or something. Programmers, not every programmer has the luxury to find a job that is, fulfills their sense of social justice or things that they're interested in working on. Sometimes it's just a job that you need to get the experience. Everybody's got to put their time in. So those early jobs were the jobs that would hire me, and they taught me the skills that I wanted. This was being a full stack engineer before it was fun to say I'm a full stack engineer. So I was more interested in learning about how to deal with people, how to do test-driven development before that was a buzzword, how open source works, the legalities behind it. The thing that we were doing is and was secondary.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but it strikes me because that's very different from what we've heard from some of the guests that we've had on Coding 101 who have talked about what it means to be a programmer. And it means primarily you're doing something you're passionate about. You're a problem solver. You're trying to take real world things and break them down into pieces that you can solve with equations, with software. And it sounds to me as if you were saying, no, I mean, there's the job, but my big part was above it. I wanted to deal with people. I wanted to deal with organizations and structures. And it's just very different. I mean, Lou, have we had a guest before who has basically said, no, it was just a job and it allowed me to do something else?
I think most of them have described the kind of the ideal situation where, hey, you're just getting into programming and you want to get into, doing something that you enjoy. How do you do that? How do you get your voice out there? And I think Scott puts it really well is, most of probably the top programmers and developers out there today who really do customer-driven software are ones that are really, like he said, put their time in and gain the experience of what to do, what not to do, what works well, what doesn't work well, and different patterns and practices, so to speak. And, that's kind of what builds upon your experience and makes you good at what you're doing. So, sometimes you do have to do things that you don't necessarily enjoy, but, understanding those things. Like, for instance, I don't enjoy doing assembly language, but understanding how assembly language works makes me a better programmer and makes me, how machine code and debugging, all that stuff works, makes me a better programmer, makes me a better developer as I work upon it.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody likes to change the oil in their car, but you don't truly understand your car until you do that. Mechanics have specific maneuvers and things that they're interested in doing when they're working on a car, and that's the fun stuff. But if you ask a mechanic, you love your job? Well, I love aspects of my job. I mean, I'm not trying to be dispassionate. I'm just trying to give you a realistic view that there's 8 hours of debugging, and that's not fun. The 2 minutes at the end when you achieve and you're like, yeah, I did it. That's good, but it still took 8 hours that sucked to get to that.
Oh, I love it. I find that so refreshing, especially to the folks out there we get a lot of people who write into the show either on Twitter or email or various social media outlets that we have, but they say, well, what does it mean to be a programmer? What do I need to do to be a programmer? And one of the pieces of advice that we always tell them is, if you're going to start, you can't chase the money. Don't think you're going to make a bunch of money, because you're not going to do it, especially at the beginning. But I like this full stack approach. Let me ask you, looking around and seeing the upcoming crop of programmers, how many of them do you think are full stack? And how many of them are super specialized? They do one or two things really, really well, and they just count on someone else to take care of the rest of the details?
Well, that's another tough question. I mean, so full stack is a buzzword that people like to use, and you can't know everything, right? I mean, we are standing on the shoulders of giants, right? Unless you're an assembly language programmer who wrote the microcode or the processor that you're sitting on, you're very likely not a full stack engineer. You're sitting on top of a garbage collector and a compiler that you don't understand, and you're calling into web services that you take for granted, and you're using authentication techniques that just happen to work, right? Every additional layer of abstraction is indistinguishable from magic, to abuse Arthur C. Clarke. And when people say they are a full stack engineer, I think that just means that they can do the website, and then they can deploy it and do the DevOps and stuff like that. So they have a particular series of skills that they've developed over a long period of time. But does that necessarily mean that they are a complete generalist? You know what I mean? Like you have to be a specialist in some things. You know, the Swiss Army knife is what people like to say, but I mean, is the Swiss Army the power they are today because of the Swiss Army knife? You know, very likely not. So you have to take things like full stack engineer with a little bit of a grain of salt.
We've got a couple of good questions from our chat room. We've got Eliz, who is asking if you believe that anyone could get a programming position today without a college degree.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that open source allows one to have a resume of footprints and fingerprints on the internet that does not necessarily require a degree. I think a degree makes you more well-rounded. I think a degree can give you some historical context. I think a degree shows that you put the work in and are willing to see something through. But if you have 3 years at a job, or you stay at a job for more than a year or two, I don't like seeing resumes where someone hops from job to job every couple of months. That shows also that you have stick-to-itiveness. So a degree is a kind of stick-to-itiveness.
What about a cert? If someone were to come to you with a series of certs, maybe not a lot of real-world experience, would you consider that, or is that a turnoff?
Depends on the cert. Like network certifications are useful. I find programming certifications less so. Programming certifications show that you are able to take tests, and that's a useful skill. It is not a replacement for other things. And I say that as someone who used to have like all the certifications for Microsoft.
Right.
It's a way to round things out, but it's not a replacement for anything.
Well, I remember I'm from that area where collecting certs was sort of a thing. It's what you did. I mean, you had extra time, so why not get another certification? And then everybody had certifications. Literally everybody in the field had certifications, and they kind of became pointless unless you did something with the certification.
Yeah. I think what I want to see is kindness, enthusiasm, the ability to get along with other humans. I want to see how people can think. I'm not a huge fan of the let's put them in front of a whiteboard and see if they can solve this bubble sort, while they sit there under pressure. I want to a really great question that we ask sometimes at Microsoft is when someone goes into the browser and types www.cnn.com, what happens? Like what happens? So then what would you say to something like that?
Oh, so you actually want them to describe, okay, well, this is happening in the browser. This is going to happen in the transport layer. These are the protocols that are being invoked. This is the communications that's taking place. These are the sessions that are being established. So is that kind of granularity?
But how far down do you keep going?
Right, exactly.
Like physics, speed of light.
OSI level?
Like quantum effects. And here's the other part. When they hit something that they don't know, I gently push on them and I say, well, what do you think is happening here? Because you're basically asking them to solve a problem, right? Oh. What must be happening? Because there's a black box now. They've come up against a black box. They know that they poke it and something happens. Like they know that a lot of people know that DNS exists. They do not know how DNS works. So then you ask them, well, how do you think DNS works? It's not a trick question. It's not meaning to fool them or sneak, or it's meaning to see how their brains work. And this has nothing to do with C# versus Ruby or Node versus C++. It's just, can this person be a systems level thinker?
So you're looking for inquisitiveness, intuition, and maybe just the ability to take best guesses?
It's not about best guess. It's about understanding how you and the system work together at a larger scope. I'll give you an example that I tell sometimes in my talks. My wife has now, as of next week, she'll have 4 different degrees. She's got a master's and she speaks different languages. She's an incredibly smart person, but she's not a programmer and she's not so much a systems thinker. She's more of a finance person. She lost her wedding ring. It fell down into the pipe, whatever, the drain. And from her perspective, it was gone. That was the end of the wedding ring, because her mental model is that you turn the faucet on and water appears at this level and then travels 6 inches and then disappears. So the water exists here. And she's not 100% clear where it comes from, other than pipes, and not 100% clear where it goes. So she's not a plumber. I also am not a plumber. But my sense of the layers of abstraction extends one additional frame in the call stack below that. I know that it goes underneath the cabinet and then through the little bendy thing. I don't know what that's called. And then it disappears into a puff of smoke and goes off into the universe, right? So I have one additional layer of abstraction. Does that make me better, smarter, whatever? No, I just have a little more sense of the system. So I go underneath there and I open the little bendy thing and I pull the trap, I pull the ring out. And from my wife's perspective, I have reached into a wormhole and pulled, from the depths her wedding ring. But it turns out I just had one additional layer of abstraction. But I also kind of puzzled it out. Now, if it had gone through the trap and out into the wall, I might have a little bit more trouble, but I have a general idea of where it goes until it gets into the sewer. But you see what I'm saying? It's just about one more layer in the call stack. So had I pushed my wife, a systems thinker, on this, she would have puzzled it out. And then once you understand that layer, then it becomes intuitive to you to push for more things. One of my kids was having trouble with the toaster recently. I could just push a button, or I could show them, let's take the toaster apart. It's safe. We unplug it. We'll take the toaster apart. Let's learn how the toaster works. I want people who like that, who want to look at that one additional layer, who want to dig for their stuff in the trap and in the pipes. That's a long answer, but I think it makes my point.
Oh, it's great. It's the process of critical thinking.
Yeah, it is. It's systems level thinking. I had a really great guest on my podcast. I have a show called Hanselminutes, and we had Keisha Rogers on, and she was talking about how everyone wants to teach kids how to code. And she's like, no, let's teach kids how to think, right? Coding is an artifact of thinking. I agree with
Scott. So to kind of shift gears a little bit, one thing I'm interested about is you do a lot of side projects, but then you make them public, right? You do like podcasts and you blog about them. What makes you want to share that information? Does it add to your ability to remember things? Like what kind of adds to that capability of doing things like that?
Well, I think that learning is fun, right? You spend all this time learning and collecting stuff and collecting knowledge, but then if it just sits in your head, it doesn't move the ball forward. It doesn't help anyone else out. So anytime I learn anything, I blog about it. But I'm very clear that I'm blogging from a place of ignorance. That makes sense? Like, yeah. I've got this, hang on, my left arm is broken here, so I'm having a little trouble. This is a 3D printer here. So I go and I work on this 3D printer and I set this all up, and I work on it for, 6 or 7 hours, and I struggle with it and I fight with it, and it becomes a huge problem. And then I learn tons, 20 or 30 different things that I learn about my 3D printer. And I'm like, sorry, I blog about it, but I don't want to blog like I'm an expert, right? So I make a joke out of that. I'm like, okay, I am now officially an expert in 3D printing. I've been doing this for 6 straight hours. So learn from me, the expert in 3D printing. And I basically just blog about all this stuff in the attempt that it might help somebody. And someone else is going to go and Google and find my post. So then all that learning isn't wasted. I'm not being selfish and storing all that learning for myself. So anytime you learn something, give it a URL. Does that make sense? Give it a permalink. Wiki, docs, pull request to Markdown in an open source something, a Medium post, put it out there because other people are looking for those same questions.
Scott, I work a lot in academia, and there's this thing that happens, the culture of the expert, and it's this idea that there are only those few people, those chosen, who have become an expert, who have mastered their field, who have contributed to the corpus of knowledge about whatever it is that they're supposed to be an expert of.
Sure.
And they are the people you cite, and that's where knowledge comes from. And you can trickle it down from them, but you ultimately have to go to that. We've seen that flip around a little bit. Now, I hear that in what you're talking about. If you get knowledge, you put it out there. You may not say, I'm an expert, at least not unless you're joking. You may not say, I have all the knowledge about this, but I have this piece that worked really, really well for me, and I'd love for someone to build off of it.
Right. I'm not an expert. I'm an amateur who's ahead of you.
Exactly. And I don't think we have much of that culture. I see a lot of people who are afraid to contribute because they think, I'm not really a programmer. I'm not a developer.
Yeah.
I've spent two months on this. Other people have years. What can I possibly give you?
What's that joke? I tweeted something recently that I've seen similar things tweeted about before, which is that, I'm looking for a senior engineer with 5 years experience in that JavaScript library that was released last week. Right. I mean, seriously, I did a decade in Angular. You know what I mean? I mean, come on. No systems thinking. I've got 20 plus years of systems thinking and about a week experience in everything else. No one is an expert anymore except on the thing that they have experience on. I think people really need to avoid making declarative statements about stuff. There's a great quote by Quentin Tarantino that says, he who is most likely to make declarative statements is most likely to be called a fool in retrospect. So I try to avoid that if at all possible. We are all just a couple of weeks ahead of each other. And if you know something, you figured something out, blog about it. And if you're wrong, go back and blog and say, oh, totally was wrong, fall on your sword. I'm not trying to impress anybody. I'm the first one to say I screwed up and I have no idea what I'm talking about.
You speak of something that I think follows in that vein when you speak of cloud computing, when you speak about the promise of the cloud. I want to get to that. I want to talk a little bit about how that has changed or should be changing what people think is the right language to learn. But first, could we take just a moment? I need to take a moment to pay some bills here and thank the first sponsor of this episode of Coding 101. Now, let me ask you something. If you are developing, you're probably going to be looking at developing a mobile app. And we know that's where the money is. And you're probably going to be developing for something for iOS, because we all know that that's where people are willing to throw their money away too. But if you are considering that vein of work, then you got to ask yourself, how are you going to monetize? You could do it the old way. The old way, in my day, back in the old school train of thought, you would set up your own servers and you would set up your own transactional server, and you would probably make some sort of arrangement with a financial company in order to be able to process payments, and you would have to make sure that your back end is secure. Yeah, you could do all that. I mean, if you had a lot of free time and were really, really bored, or you could just go to Braintree. Braintree is the easiest way to, enable your mobile app for payments. Braintree is the place to go if you want to have an easy integration. 10 lines of code and it's ready to go. Not only that, they've got a V.0 SDK that makes things easy. It has the language that you want and has the platform that you want to develop for. Now, we were able to speak with Juan Benitez, the Braintree CTO, and this is what he said, what it's like to be working with Braintree.
Any developer platform GitHub is willing to use to secure its most sensitive data and to power its payments, it should be good enough for a lot of folks. It's really important to make your customers happy, to earn the respect of those types of customers, and then a lot of good things will happen as a result of that.
Braintree is the payment solution that's used by companies like Uber, Airbnb, Hotel Tonight, Living Social, Muntree, and GitHub. It's the place to go when you want to have just 10 lines of code that you can put into your app and be up and running in moments. In other words, you get to spend more time developing the app you want rather than messing around with the finances that you don't want to play with. It supports Android, iOS, and JavaScript clients. It's got .NET, Node.js, Java, Perl, PHP, Python, and Ruby, and they provide clear and elegant documentation, which is something that every developer is going to want. You don't want to have to stumble through code in order to make it do what you think it's supposed to do. Braintree gives you an easy way to accept multiple payment types with one integration. With quick, knowledgeable developer support, you can accept Apple Pay, PayPal, Bitcoin, Venmo, cards, and whatever's next, all with a single integration. Now, to learn more and for your first $50,000 in transactions fee-free, go to braintreepayments.com/coding. That's braintreepayments.com/coding. And we thank Braintree for their support of Coding 101. Now, let's get back to Scott. Scott, I watched a presentation that you gave once, and you said something that really struck me. And that is that people, programmers, like talking about what language you should learn, what language is the best language to learn. And the cloud has really changed what that means. I mean, you no longer have to learn the right language. The cloud should abstract that away.
Yeah, I mean, you can use whatever language makes you happy. What I tell people if they're getting into programming right now, that they should learn JavaScript and a systems language, meaning something that runs on the server side. And that may be JavaScript in both cases, but it could be JavaScript in Erlang or JavaScript in C++ or JavaScript in C# or F# or whatever. But something that runs in the browser and something that runs on the server. And that gives you two languages to learn. So like, for example, if back in the day, they used to say, you learn English and then you learn Spanish, right, in high school. I think you should learn two languages or three. So I think polyglot programming is kind of the way things are. You shouldn't just limit yourself to curly brace related languages. You should learn at least two, possibly three.
I have to get you to weigh in on this. We always get people, anytime we talk about the cloud, we're going to get the classic snarkism, which is, well, you do understand that the cloud is just someone else's computer, right? And that's the typical, that's the throwaway. Yeah,
okay.
I mean, I understand what they're trying to say, but they're really being dismissive about something that is way more than just a data center that someone else has. That's way more than just a series of computers that somebody else has. I believe the example you used that I liked the best was, if I own my own servers, my own computers, I'm going to be very reluctant to trash it, to have a party every night. But if it's a cloud, it's basically a hotel room I'm renting.
Yep. That's I think I used that analogy also.
Yeah, and that really changes the way we think about it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what the promise of the cloud is elasticity and not caring about the hardware, right? Like right now, everything that I own other than my blog runs in the cloud. I haven't moved my blog over to the cloud yet. My blog is on a real hardware machine with real hard drives that one day will fail. And when they do, I'm going to have to restore from backup. If I was in the cloud, I wouldn't think about that.
Right. And so what does that enable you to do? So when you think of Microsoft Azure services, when you think about AWS, when you think about what Google's trying to do, how does that change how you develop a service or develop an app?
So classically, you would have like a website that talks to a database and someone puts something in the shopping cart and you go and write some code that inserts a row into the database. Database goes down and you get an error message. A cloud-based app architecturally assumes that everything could go down at any point and you need to deal with that. I think that's funny because everyone expects the cloud to be up all the time, but the architectural assumption that we need to start making is that any aspect of it is down at any moment. So rather, this is just an example, right? We could talk about this for hours, but I'm giving you a short version. Rather than you shoving something into the database directly, you might write code that puts it on a durable queue, and then something is picking up off the queue that something's been put into the shopping cart, and then that goes into a shopping cart, which is in its own either microservice or durable queue or durable data set. And the data sets are not all one database. So, for example, if the shopping cart's down, maybe people can still look at the products or they can still check out, right? You want to make it so the site is still usable even though pieces of it are down.
I also remember, I don't know what presentation you use this quote, but it is one of my favorite quotes. I can't remember who it's supposed to be attributed to. I'm pretty sure it's apocryphal, but someone once said they really only see a market for 4 computers in the world. And it would be based on continents. And essentially you'd have these refrigerator or larger size computers, and everyone else would have a connection to it, and it would do the processing.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because when you think about what the promise of cloud computing is, it's really coming back to that. The browser is now a virtual machine using some processing power someplace else.
It is almost like you watched my talk on the subject.
I watched several of your talks on the subject, by the way, which I had. If anyone here has not watched any of your talks. Just jump onto YouTube and watch them because
Well,
they
that's
combine.
I wasn't fishing for compliments, but thank you.
No, I'm serious. This is why I got really excited when Lou said that he had gotten you. You managed to combine subjects that most people outside of developers might not be interested in, along with pop culture references, and you make it understandable, which is fantastic.
You know, speaking of pop culture references, I was on a podcast once called JS Jabber, and they were very nice people. If they ever listen to this, I hope, hello, you're all very nice people. And at the very end of it, there's like the thing where they say, hey, let's, everyone should have a website or a link that you want to mention. Like, what's your hot topic for the week? And then we all went around and we talked about our hot topics and stuff. And when they got to me, Beyonce had just cut her hair short, and it was really problematic for me. And it was on my mind, and I was concerned about it. And I brought it up, and there was just silence. It was crickets. And I didn't know if I should call the agency or what needed to be done. If they weren't Beyonce fans, we need to get them, we need to have them killed. But I was a little disappointed that they didn't have that pop culture knowledge. I feel like there's somewhere out there's an opportunity for a website that is a combination of Stack Overflow and BuzzFeed that could balance one's love of pop culture and programming at the same time.
Well, your presentations throw out a lot of references. I mean, they are fast and they're furious, and you don't dwell on any of them, which, by the way, is a very good trait for a stand-up comic. I know that.
Oh, you mean squeezing the joke?
Yeah. Not trying. Okay, look, no, you're going to get this because I spent a lot of time setting this joke up. You're going to laugh. No, you just move on, which I like because it does make people get the references they actually do understand.
And hopefully go and search for the ones they didn't.
Right. But which, when someone's talking about JavaScript, you kind of want that. You want someone to be able to say, okay, well, I understand what you're trying to do now. Which, by the way, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about JavaScript. Everyone that is in our audience right now, aside from maybe 2 or 3 people, think that JavaScript was the spawn of Satan, that it's the worst language ever created, that it should be eradicated, that it should be destroyed, and that programmers who use JavaScript should be hung, drawn, and quartered.
Okay.
Is there a point to that question?
Well, I mean,
I'm not sure where you're going with that. I don't think JavaScript's that bad.
yes.
I think,
explain why.
Because it works. I mean, here's the thing. You can say all that you want about cars or the design of airplanes and stuff, but they work, right? Success is a pretty good metric. So is JavaScript aesthetically pleasing? Does it have its bad parts and its good part? It's fun to pick on JavaScript, but it's still the language that we have, right? It's it maybe isn't the language we deserve, but it's the language that we have.
So you do, Scott, you do tons of stuff. I mean, you do podcasts, you do your daily job, you build tools, you open source, you're doing 3D printers, promote research, public speaking. Can you give us a little bit of insight on how you do time management? Because I'm always curious about that. One thing also, you said, I don't do things after 5 p.m. So I'm always curious about somebody. Do you not sleep? Like, what's your secret? Can you help us out understand that?
There's no secret. It's just not wasting time. I just think that a lot of people waste a lot more time than they think. I watch, not you personally, but y'all, we'll just say y'all. I watch y'all on Twitter all day long, constantly. I watch people talking about what they're doing, watching TV shows, sitting on their butts. There's stuff that you can do that is reasonable multitasking. Like, I like watching TV, but I do it while I'm working out, so I do it while I'm on the treadmill or whatever. Or I bring my Surface in and I lift weights while I'm watching a show. So there's feasible multitasking, and that'll give you an extra hour or 2 a day. I think also that people don't think about work as a sprint. It's really easy to just kind of go into work and kind of goof around for a couple hours, and you maybe put your 8 hours in or your 9 hours in, but really only 5 hours of work got done. If you were a little more ruthless about it, where get into work, get it done, get out, you might gain another hour or 2 that way. And if you gain 2 to 3 hours a day, then you've gained a significant amount of time every week.
I think 5 hours of work a day out of an 8-hour day is pretty generous. It's probably
if you're saying 5 hours of accomplishment, then yeah, I would agree with you.
Yeah.
But my point is that you don't want to tolerate the not accomplishment part of work.
Well, how did you get that instilled in you? Because I mean, that's all will, and that's learning, and that's habit. What made you work like that?
I mean, we only have so much time, right? Like on the planet. I don't know how long I'm going to be here. So I want to make sure that I make use of the time that I have.
All right. Well, that's definitely a philosophical
I
stance.
mean, it's a little Debbie Downer,
No.
but everybody's got something that's going to change their lifespan, as do I. So I make use of the time that I have.
Let's talk about this. You are an outspoken advocate for diabetes research. And you detail in your blog what it's like to live with diabetes, what it's like to have a pump with you 24 hours, to have to take shocks. Have you updated your prick count, your finger prick count?
I don't really prick my finger much anymore. I use this thing. Here's my thing.
Oh,
So that's my blood sugar right now.
that's needleless?
It is. Well, I mean, it's not needleless. There's a needle in me, but it's
Right.
stuck in me and it's not going anywhere. It's where is it? It's down here.
Right.
Implanted in my stomach. I move it every 4 or 5 days.
And
I just do the finger pricks to calibrate it.
And you actually turned that into part of your passion. You developed the very first application for diabetic management. For the Palm, way back when, yes?
Yeah, 93. I wouldn't say it was necessarily the first. I would say it's the first portable one, definitely. It was a diabetes management system for the Palm Pilot. But the thing is about that I like to say is, and I do not want to take credit for anything. It's very important for anyone who's listening who either is diabetic or knows someone who's worked on diabetes stuff that any diabetic engineer immediately tries to solve the problem with the engineering skills that they have. So, I may have made the Palm Pilot thing, but before me, I'm sure someone had one on a TI-89 calculator, and before that person, they had it on a Trash 80. Every diabetic immediately becomes diabetic, turns to whatever piece of hardware they have available, and then starts working on the diabetes management system for Apple II. So, to be clear, I take no credit for that.
But you've been outspoken about it, and I think there is a bit more awareness of the disease now because, well, it's really hitting the United States now. The last time I checked, it was 14 plus million diagnosed cases, probably 6 plus million undiagnosed cases of diabetes, type 2 diabetes, I believe it was.
Right, and it's very important to point out that type 1 and type 2 are very, very different things. I am a type 1, and I can't speak to the issues that type 2s have.
Right. Different diseases, but horrific effects. But it is
Horrific's
interesting.
a little rough, but okay. Thank you for that painful reminder of my lifelong illness. But
well, it does force people to really manage the way that they live, which doesn't seem to be a problem with you. I mean, that goes back to Lou's question. You've done a really good job with time management. You've done a very good job in deciding what you need to spend time on. That's not a skill a lot of people have, and unfortunately, that is something that plays directly into that disease.
yeah, if you don't pay attention to diabetes, it will get you. Unquestionably, it'll eventually kill you.
Yeah.
So best we pay attention, and best that we have tools that allow us to do just that.
Well, we're going to get back into programming in just a bit, but I feel strongly enough about this. You have an organization that you're working with. You do raise funds. So would you like to give them a little plug here?
Oh, I work with the American Diabetes Association, and if you just go to hanselman.com/fight diabetes, and you can hear, you see my YouTube about how I deal with it, and donate money if you want. It's tax deductible. There you go. Yeah. I didn't come on the show to plug anything, but that's very kind of you.
No, but it is important. And I mean, considering our audience and considering what we deal with on a regular basis, that's actually something that's very good to be aware of.
Yeah.
Now, again, when we come back, I want to get into the topic that people were really hoping you would start with, and that is Microsoft. We have to talk about your time at Microsoft because it has been significant, both in what it has done for you and in where you've been able to sort of subtly push Microsoft into going. You've had a big footprint on the company. You've had a big footprint on what they do with their software, and I think we probably should spend some time chatting about that. Does that sound okay with you?
Sure, if you like.
All right. So we'll be right back with Scott Hanselman, but before we do that, let's go ahead and thank the second sponsor of this episode of Coding 101. Now, okay, let me ask you another question for you developers out there. How do you host your application? How do you test your application? How do you make sure it's ready for prime time? Again, if we go back to the OG day, the answer would be, well, you stand up a server. You have a box you actually have, and maybe you open it up to the internet. I don't know. Maybe you've got a decent enough connection in your home office or your small office to be able to do that. Perhaps invite a few friends to download your app and test it out with some real-world traffic. Again, you can do that. That's all a possibility. But if you didn't want to go through that hassle, you could instead just go to DigitalOcean. Now, DigitalOcean is based on a very simple idea. Take everything you want to use and everything you want to run and put it into an applet. An applet called a droplet. A droplet, which is a virtual private server that can be customized and deployed to host websites, web apps, production applications, personal projects, virtual desktops, and pretty much anything else you can think of with full root access. We use DigitalOcean here. It's how I test out my programs. Now, the nice thing about it is it scales so well. I can open it up just for a couple of hours, just for the people I need to hit it so that I know whether or not it's going to collapse under load, and then scale it up to a small deployment, a large deployment, a geographical deployment, a worldwide deployment. That's what DigitalOcean does best, and that's why over 400,000 developers use it, including me. You can deploy and configure your droplets via a streamlined control panel or simple API. You can choose your OS, be it Ubuntu, CentOS, Debian, Fedora, CoreOS, and FreeBSD. And a one-click install allows you to quickly deploy apps like Django, Docker, Drupal, LAMP, GitLab, MediaWiki, Node.js, WordPress, Ghost, Magneto, OwnCloud, Ruby on Rails, and so much more. All their servers are built on hex-core machines with dedicated ECC memory and RAID SSD storage. A server is going to have up to 20 CPUs, 64 gigabytes of memory, and 640 gigabytes of SSD hard space. Now, it's highly scalable. Again, you can start with just a single droplet instance that's opened up for a few hours and go all the way up to something that's deployed across colos, across continents when, well, you make your billionth dollar. They also offer you auto backups and snapshots, things that can quickly fall to the wayside when you quickly start deploying and scaling up your application. They give you full-featured DNS management. You can even use dedicated IPs, and they promise you gigabit speeds and 99.99% uptime. Their web console access with HTML5 plus SSH, SFTP, and KVM VNC for virtual desktops means that you'll never have to worry about how you manage your droplets and your virtual servers. And it's so easy to get started that you can literally deploy your own SSD cloud server in as little as 55 seconds. So here's what we want you to do. We want you to try DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean has incredibly affordable and straightforward pricing with servers starting at just $5 per month. There's also hourly pricing available starting at less than a penny per hour. But we're going to make it so that you can get started today and deploy an SSD cloud server for free. Visit DigitalOcean.com and create an account. Once you confirm your email and account information, go to the billing section and enter the promo code C101 for a free $10 credit. That's plenty to get started and explore what DigitalOcean can do for you. That's DigitalOcean.com. And once you sign up, enter the code C101 in the billing section for a $10 credit. And we thank DigitalOcean for their support of Coding 101. We're back with Scott Hanselman from Microsoft. Now, Scott, at Microsoft, what is your title right now?
Titles are titles. I'm a program manager. There's testers, there's developers, there's program managers, and there's like bosses. Program managers just get stuff out of the way to make sure that people get work done.
That was going to be the follow-up question. Exactly how would you describe your job? Just get things out of the way.
So I work on ASP.NET and Azure Web Tools. I manage community for ASP.NET. I manage the Insider and MVP programs for ASP.NET. I work somewhat on the open source, trying to get things out of the way. It's just being a program manager at Microsoft is playing whack-a-mole, trying to take little problems. There might be legal problems, might be there might be technical problems. It might be routing bugs, speccing out what screens should look like. It's a very miscellaneous job.
All right. In 2007, you were the principal program manager. Again, I'm sorry, I know titles are meaningless, but quote unquote, the community architect for web platform and tools at Microsoft. And
I made that title up.
You gave that up.
I made it up.
Oh, you made it up?
I made that title up.
Why not just say emperor? Just programs emperor.
No. So there's all these, like, for example, architect. I mean, all these titles, like you're a dev or you're a PM. Community architect was a fun title. I made it up. Principal program manager. Like right now, like my boss is principal program manager lead. That just means he has people that work for him. You know, I was a principal program manager lead once because I had 5 or 6 people who worked for me, and then I decided I didn't want to be a manager anymore. So now I don't have anyone who works for me. So those are all just HR titles. The other thing that's funny about Microsoft titles is that you put principal in the front of it, and it implies somehow that there's only one. You know, there's thousands of us. You know what I mean? So people are always, particularly journalists, saying the. You know, like someone's like, oh, he's the principal program manager, or she is the principal program manager for Halo or whatever. It's like, no, there's probably like 100 people like that. It's funny when people leave Microsoft, there's a bunch of people who've left and then complain about stuff about Microsoft. And then when the journalist writes about it, they'll say, so-and-so, you know, formerly the principal program manager for .NET. I'm like, no, that's not kind of how the titles work. They're dumb. They're titles. I'm a developer advocate. I'm a person that tries to help people out, and I'm a community guy.
Let's stick with that. Let's go past the titles, and let me ask you about that. Helping the community out, part of that is to take input from the community and to help turn that into a better product.
I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, be it Microsoft's product line, be it an open source product.
I'm a people person.
You're a people person.
I take the specs to the engineer.
Don't you understand what I do here? No, but in doing that, how do you balance that? Because there is that fine line between listening to customers and giving them what they actually want. Because most of the time, if you listen enough, what customers want will be contradictory. So how do you turn something that may be contradictory into something that you believe will be the next good product or the next good open source project?
Well, it's a combination of data. Microsoft's very data-driven. We have this thing called software quality metrics, or what they call SQUIM data. When you run a Microsoft product and they say, hey, would you like to anonymously help us out? And you say yes or no. What you're doing isn't letting us read your personal stuff. You're just letting us see the little events, like, are you a person that uses hotkeys? Are you a person that uses menus and stuff? So then when we have a meeting about whether we should do something with hotkeys or menus, we can say 43% of people do it this way and 65% of people do it that way. And all of those metrics help Microsoft make those decisions to make sure that the product works for the vast majority of people.
Scott, I know that you've got a hard out coming up really soon here. I do want to give one more question to you, though, and this is for, since we are a Coding 101 show, a beginner show, could you offer a little bit of advice? What would you want to tell to that fresh graduate or that person who's considering a career move into computer science, into programming, to inspire them to be that critical process thinker, or to be the next person who just figures things out because they've got the logical tools that they need to be able to do that? How would you want them to look at what you do?
I don't know how to answer that. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm not sure how what I do matters to the new person. Help me out. Try again.
Okay, well, here we go. You're one of the people that we look to when we think about where we're going to take cloud, where we're going to take applications and services, where Azure will be in the next 10 years. To someone who is just starting, looking to you and hoping that you'll give them a clue as to where they should push their resources in order to meet that final destination that you have in your mind, where should they go? Where should they be pushing their time?
I still don't know. I'm sorry. I mean,
maybe Lou can translate for me.
Help me translate. I'm not trying to be obtuse.
No,
I really am
not at all.
I promise.
It's just that we always get a lot of people who they want to know how to get into it. They want to know where's my break. How do I get known?
Break into software?
There we go.
You don't have to break into software. You just join, like open source. So here, I'll give you an example. There's a really great website called upforgrabs.net. And a lot of people out there want to get involved in open source, but they're not sure where to start, and they don't want people to be mean to them, or they're not sure what to do. There are communities. An example would be like Code Newbies. Go, search for Code Newbies. It's a welcoming community for beginners. Up for Grabs is features that are up for grabs that you can work on as a person who's just getting started. So you don't have to be a developer. You can be an IT person. You could be working at Comcast answering the phone, but you want to get started in software, you can do that. You can work on documentation. You can help them with their website. You can help with promotion. There's lots of things that you can do in open source that don't involve you becoming a senior engineer overnight. So join us and find a welcoming community that will appreciate helping you out. And I think, Code Newbies is a great place to start.
I think one thing we talked about before is like how to bootstrap into that process of becoming a coder or a developer. And you're just maybe in college and maybe you're just switching to becoming a developer or computer science or something. And what makes it passionate for you to kind of get into that business? And I think that Scott answered it well, is get involved. We talked about going to meetups and going to things that maybe Microsoft or Facebook or Google offer and stuff like that. Those are the things that are really important when it comes to getting yourself involved and meeting people, growing your network, and having a personal investment into some of the things that people are doing.
Yeah, agreed. Let me give you another idea. If you go to getinvolvedintech.com, getinvolvedintech.com, it is a free 2-hour-long feature-length movie that I did with Rob Connery that talks about blogging and Twitter and GitHub and Stack Overflow and all of those things. It's totally free. We made a deal with Pluralsight. So think about it as a class on how to get involved in tech.
Scott Hanselman, who detests titles, so we're going to call him a people person at Microsoft. Thank you so very much for spending some time with us. I know our audience appreciates it. And I know you don't like plugs, but could you please tell our audience where they might find you and more of your work?
Just go to Hanselman.com, or you can try. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. You can go and Google for Scott. I'm in an epic battle right now with the Scott toilet paper people. So if you want either to find me or some personal tissue, Google for Scott might get you that. But Hanselman.com will get you all of my stuff, my podcast, books, where I'm going to speak, and subscribe to my blog. Oh, and then actually a plug. You might, all of you, enjoy thisdeveloperslife.com. It is a blatant ripoff of This American Life, an homage to This American Life, but for programmers. You might check that out as well.
There we go. We thank you for joining us on Coding 101. We'll let you go because we want to respect your time, as much as we haven't so far. But thank you so very, very much for being part of our Coding 101 family.
Thanks, Scott.
Of course, we also want to thank Lou Maresca. Lou Maresca, a senior software lead at Microsoft. Lou, first of all, thank you for getting Scott Hanselman. That was a lot of fun. He is as brilliant as he looks in all his YouTube videos. But enough about brilliance. Let's talk about me. Wait, no. See, that doesn't sound right. I think we're supposed to talk about but now we have to talk about brilliance again, and it messes up the entire pattern. Could you please tell the Coding 101 audience where they can find you and your work?
Absolutely. You can always find me on Twitter at LouMM. And of course, all my work that I do at Microsoft is just found at crm.dynamics.com.
Yes, and as Eric Duckman in the chat room says, we will always consider you a principal at Microsoft.
The only one. Actually, there's two Lewises at Microsoft, but we're okay.
Folks, don't forget that you can find our show every Monday at 2:30 p.m. Pacific time. If you watch at live.twit.tv, you can see the show live. That means you get the pre-show, the post-show, everything that goes in between, how the sausage is actually made. If you're going to be watching live, why not jump into our chat room at irc.twit.tv, where you can chat with the other folks, the other members of the Twit TV army, as well as asking questions during the show that could be asked of our guests. Now, the next 2 weeks, Lou, I believe we're pre-recorded because of DEF CON and Black Hat. So we'll be collecting all sorts of really fun enterprisey/security-related news and gadgets. But right after that, we're going to be doing our Twit API segment. We did a little bit of a preview earlier with Patrick Delehanty just to show people what they could expect out of the module. But do you want to tease it a little bit? What will people be able to do by the time they're done with our 4 or 5 weeks?
We want you to be able to ingest the data that you can get from the Twit API. So like if you're building an app, whether it's on iOS or Android or C# or Windows platforms, universal apps, how can you use the API to ingest it and build a really cool app to be able to view the streams, maybe talk about the different shows that are out there and when they're available and where you can get them and that kind of thing. So we want you to give that a capability to be able to find out how to use it and how to ingest it in the platform that you want.
And we'll see you then for our next module. Again, thanks to everyone here at the Brick House who makes this show possible. Of course, to Lisa and to Leo and to our super fresh TD, Zach. Now, Lou, how about this? You want to take them out?
Of course, thanks, Padre, for all having me on, as well as Zach, TD. And again, thanks for all for coming, and Scott for coming and doing the interview. And thanks for coming to Coding 101. End of line.